Okay, I just got a live stream notification, so.
Yeah, we are finishing loading. And okay, I believe we are live, ready to go.
Great. Okay, I will call to order this October 14th, 2021 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:03 p.m. First item on the agenda, citizens to be heard. Corey, you mentioned there was a phone number calling in. Is that person still here?
You can show here. We'll admit this person. All right, we may have a citizens to be heard.
Hey, this is John Knight. I'm dialing in. How's it going?
Oh, hey.
Hey, John, sounds good. All right, we've just started the meeting.
Awesome. This is wonderful. We have an excellent turnout of planning commissioners. We have myself, Kai Marienfeld, Britton Ballard, Jessica O'Leary, Luke Wojciechowski, Ruben Villapando Salas, and John Knight on the phone. Awesome. We were just having citizens to be heard. Corey, otherwise it doesn't look like there's anyone here.
Correct. Nobody in the waiting room, and then no comments submitted.
All right. Next item, an action item, consideration and possible recommendation of Moab City Resolution 31, 2021, a resolution conditionally approving the Lawrence Minor Subdivision 2021 of property located at 479 Bowen Circle, Moab, Utah, 84532. This is a briefing and a possible action. Corey.
Perfect. Let me share a screen here. Okay, I think that should be showing up correctly. Alrighty, so Lawrence Minor Subdivision 2021. This is a resubmittal of a previously approved minor subdivision from 2020. The location's at 479 Bowen Circle. Taylor Lawrence as the property owner, coming in to subdivide that near quarter-acre lot in the R2 zone. So this is the Vicinity Map showing that parcel there. Currently existing, and we'll see this on the draft survey plat as well, but a existing residential property here, and then an established ADU trailer that's located along this back kind of northeastern side of the property. This is the recorded county plat showing that frontage length. And then hopefully this is showing up okay. It's a little pixelated. The draft survey plat. This was the previously approved survey plat that was just resubmitted. Typically, we will accept an extension for a plan like this. So once the resolution was approved, they have 1 year to record that with the county recorder's office for final recording. This property owner, given COVID-19 and then development of that property being delayed, as well as currently having tenants there, was not able to record this, as one of the conditions of that approval was that they would need to move or remove this existing ADU trailer in order to accommodate the setback requirements as well as access. As you can see, it would interfere with that right of way, or excuse me, the internal access of that back flag lot. So with not wanting to displace the current tenants until he is ready to develop, he just missed that window to file for that extension. So now running through as a new application with the same submitted materials. With that background, this is just the run through of the current submittal for 2021. And then that original narrative as to what was being proposed on that lot, with the specific condition to move that existing trailer in lot 2 before it can be recorded with the county. Moving on from this process, just to clarify further, is that once this resolution were to be approved, that applicant would have 1 year with the option of one 1-year extension. So it gives them up to a total maximum of 2 years to retain this without it needing to come back to the Plan Commission. What this does is give appropriate time to the applicants to get the affairs of the property in order to record that. And then with the extension, we're able to review it again without allowing an applicant to come in and just basically ride out the potential that if there is any change in zoning, he would not have to apply. So annually, he'll have to re-up to make sure that that property is in accordance with the appropriate zoning code. In addition to that previous condition that was for that existing structure to be moved, the engineering department had reviewed these plans again, as is customary process with every application, and came up with a few additional comments and notes to be added to the plat before, hopefully before city council sees this, but certainly before it's recorded for final recording as well. So waiting on the plat amendments through the surveyor to have those adjusted. So relatively pretty straightforward, despite there being conditions on this property. I'll stop sharing now. We can open up for discussion, but as we do go to move on this recommendation, it would be possible to approve this motion without having to read the entire conditions extension. I know it's quite long, but if you were to say subject to the following conditions, one, and that all engineering comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the city engineer, would be sufficient to forward this recommendation for the resolution. So I will stop sharing screen and allow us to move forward if we have any questions.
Thanks, Corey. Just looking at the vicinity map here. Yeah, I remember this from a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, technically just over a year ago. It was, where were we at?
What a
I think it
world.
was yep, in September sometime, I think, but it was nearly the same resolution number from 2020. So
Great. Just looking.
My only question is there a way to retain that ADU that would be in compliance with the new, if the new ADU restrictions or codes go into effect?
essentially, yes, because I believe it is over 500 square feet. That what the issue is now is that residence is residing, on the access and within the setback. So the options for the condition were to either one, just move it onto the lot and just keep it as is, but have it be in compliance, or remove it, which is what his plan is, and then to build housing on the back half. And then once he's done with the back half, he would remove the front property and redevelop that front property as well.
All right, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, so as always, in the agenda summary, there is a potential motion that you can read. And as Corey was saying, I am seeing, Corey, that the recommended motion does not include the engineering comment conditions. If I'm looking at the summary.
Right, that would make sense. Those were submitted to the planning department last minute. So we have already had posted the agenda summary at that point, and then the engineering came back to us and said, oh, for this meeting, we'd like to include these conditions as well. So I will return that shared screen so you can have that updated
Thank you.
set of conditions as well.
I just want to make sure that that's not going to get lost in the fray between us and the city council.
Certainly not. Okay, if you're able to see that.
There you go. Thanks, Corey. Anyone want to give it a shot?
I'll give it a shot.
All right, Britton.
Do I have to say my name or do I just go? Okay. I recommend to move that the Planning Commission move forward a positive recommendation to City Council on Moab City Resolution number 31-2021, a resolution conditionally approving the Lawrence Minor subdivision of property located at 479 Bowen Circle, Moab, Utah, subject to the following condition. The existing structure located on Lot 2 of the Lawrence Minor subdivision 2021 must be removed or relocated in compliance with property setbacks within Lot 2 of the Lawrence Minor subdivision 2021 before final recording of the plot. All engineering comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the city engineer prior to city approval by the city engineer of the final plot, including, do I have to continue?
No, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
That's good. And you'll put those forward. Okay, so we have a motion, positive
I'll
recommendation.
second.
All right, we have a second. We're ready to vote when you are, Corey.
Perfect. All right, Luke,
Aye.
Ruben,
Aye.
Jesso,
Aye.
Britton,
Aye.
and Kaya.
Aye.
And I won't forget John.
Thank you. Aye.
Perfect. All right, unanimously 6-0, and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Nice motion, Britton. That was complicated. All right, next item is a discussion item, sign code relocation and possible amendments. Discussion on draft ordinance 2021-18 text amendment to the Moab Municipal Code, including relocation of section 15.44, sign code to new section 17.93 sign code, and relocation of titles 17.09.430, 440, 450, 460, 465, and 470 to new section title 17.93 side code, and amending the MMC with clarifying language identifying prohibited LED and LCD display technologies, and amending Moab Municipal Code with clarifying language identifying exempt, temporary, and prohibited signs, and amending the Moab Municipal Code sign code definitions. There we go. It's a lot.
What a mouthful.
We
Yeah,
get
I
those
saw
longer.
I saw that posted in the paper for the public hearing notice, and it took up a good section of that page. I have a presentation we can share with this
All right.
as well. And again, this is a discussion item, so no actions being proposed at this time, but it would be helpful to get continued comments from you as we're drafting what that ordinance language might in particular say. And then there are some components of this that we can think about incorporating that would be in addition to what the general movements of code within our general municipal code here. So we'll get going. So discussion regarding the sign code, it would be surrounding the draft ordinance 2021-18. This would include a text amendment for what would be the relocation of the sign code, basically from the building and construction Title 15 code to zoning code, which is where it should be. But in years past, it made sense at that time that signs were mostly governed by the building official as far as the erection of those and how they be. But with the development of zoning and how we coordinate with the signs, it really should be moved to the main title of Title 17. And then in addition, within that, the relocation / incorporation, this is a potential option we could talk about as well, of the various sections of sign code that already live within our zoning code, but they're dispersed, to relocate everything to one location, which will make compliance, citizen readability much, much easier and straightforward. Part 2 of this would include amending the clarifying language prohibiting LED and LCD display technologies. We currently do have sufficient language prohibiting what is basically display signs. So motion and digital displays are prohibited currently, but what this would do is bring us more in line with what the county has adopted just recently. There's just, and you'll see in the draft language here, just minor changes that we could make that just even further establish that what we're trying to do. And this is in, of course, response to some of the legislation that was going on this previous session up in Salt Lake regarding allowing digital billboards, which with our current council has been something that we've voiced as something we are not going to permit in the city. So that's just helping there. And in In addition to that, amending the clarifying language for existing exempt, temporary, and prohibited signs. What that means is right now we do have some antiquated language that we're needing to fill in with interpretation of policy, which makes code compliance a little bit more difficult. So right now, we'll be talking about this tonight. As I'm sure you've seen around town, we have a great number of what we call blade signs. They're the curved top flag signs that are freestanding. What you might often have seen at car dealerships, types of flagging or open or now hiring type of flags. Most of them are situated right on or near the sidewalk and right of way. We don't currently have any language addressing those and where we would like to go with allowing those or prohibiting them, which is the current action. So there we have it as far as the bulk of what that ordinance is going to do. So there are some various actions. What spurred this was Grand County's new sign code update for digital display technologies, like we had talked about, had been requested by Christina Sloan, the attorney for the county, reaching out to the city, again, in an act of solidarity that when there are companies coming into Moab, the county and the city have at least consistent language that we're not explicitly prohibiting or permitting contradicting things, especially with our city limit and county boundaries being so interdispersed. It just creates confusion. We want to eliminate as much of that as possible. Forgive my automotive reference here, but since we've popped the hood and are going to be editing the sign code, that's been something that's been on our to-do list for quite a while, is move it back to where it should be and then consolidate it down to one place. And then, of course, within that language that we have, potentially clarify existing things or add things that we don't have that we really ought to have to aid in code compliance. Any questions so far? We're almost done with the presentation. Okay. So getting back to kind of the proposed changes, part one, this is going to encompass what is the movement of code. So not necessarily adding anything, but just moving it to the correct place. In a general sense, moving the sign code as it is existing, which is the title sign code, from 15 to 17, and creating a new sign code section, which would be 1793. The second part of that is we have some title sections in that title 17 zoning code that are very short and essentially only reference back saying within the zoning code, you have to follow the building construction code. So they're a little bit superfluous and unnecessary. So what our two options here are to just straight over relocate language, even if it's somewhat repetitious. We're moving it. That's a little bit easier for council to digest, that we're not adding anything or changing anything, we're just moving it. Or what might be better is to incorporate that language into the mirrored sections. An example of this is we currently have a section in Title 17 that says generally signs, while we do have a better, more robust section in the sign code that says general provision. So we would just collapse these different code sections. That would take a little bit more code work to do that, but it would be more efficient rather than having two sign sections under the greater section that both one says generally and the other one says general provisions. The only Title 17 sign code that would stand on its own and we would continue is the permitted illumination. That's something that was in response to our dark sky illumination code, which is handled also in that same section, Title 1709 supplementary code. So it was, rather than keeping it just in the lighting section, they said, well, it really is about signage. So they did create a new section. So that would stand on its own there. So that handles the areas of code that would be moving or consolidating right there. These are the proposed text amendments, the part twos that we're going to be looking at here. So this is the red line section that you would see for the LED and LCD improved language. So this is all of the language we have for display signs, lighted display signs. So it's quite sufficient. However, when I was reading the county code, which I included in the packet, this is the only language that really was different, was specifying the LED and LCD, etc., which leaves it open-ended that we are clearly stating, well, when they come out with 2 years, a new technology, the LTD screen, we don't have to go in and change our code to say, well, you can't have these two, but this one's not mentioned, so all of a sudden you can have it. We're saying, here's the general interpretation. Enough said about that. I think that's pretty clear. Now we're into possible changes. So the digital displays is a proposed change. We definitely want to do that, and we definitely want to move the code. Now we're getting into things that is a little bit more of the discussion topic here and how we feel about it. So this is the prohibited sign sections. The two sections we would be adding would be, we'll start with F here, is prohibited signs included those referenced under the 1793-070. That was what we just looked at. So that's just reinforcing that those LCD, LED signs are prohibited. So it shows up two sections saying you can't do them. In addition to that, we would be adding blade signs, coming up with the definition for that. Blade signs, unless secured to a permitted display apparatus, shall be prohibited. An example of a permitted display apparatus is a food truck. A food truck, for example, is able to advertise with banners with other elements, but they must be permitted and attached in a certain way, rather than, if you've seen it recently, which we permitted verbally because we didn't have the mechanisms to do it otherwise. The Peaches, our local Palisade Peaches booths that we all love this year, most of them have these blade signs out in front somewhere on that property that were not attached to their display apparatus or table. So that's something we want to lock in, because essentially these blade signs, much like carports, maybe about 10 years ago, maybe a little less, came in, and there must just have been a really good carport salesman because he got everybody. So now we have dozens and dozens of non-permitted carports that are encroaching in the setback and creating fire hazards. But at the time, the city approved those without any formal approval. So with these blade signs, in the last 2 years, they've erupted, and now every lot's got them. Everyone wants them, but it's creating a lot of hazards for the right-of-way and for our enforcement, and just in general clutteredness of our community with signs. So if that's something that we want to address here, is prohibited or not. And then, of course, additional changes pending discussion here if there are elements that you as a commission feel are not represented within this prohibited sign section that ought to be. All right, possible changes part 2. This is something that we've been working with Mona on for code compliance, a good portion of this, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from Mona as well, and we'll be incorporating that into our next session, which will be a public hearing action item section for this ordinance. But in addition, I'm sure you're all aware of many of the commercial properties that have put up big banners that say open or now hiring. Big banners, some of them in excess of what would be 10 feet by 10 feet. I mean, they've gotten really big. And this is where, starting from, sorry, we got dogs. Starting from what was permitted, which are smaller signs, it tends to grow and grow and grow until finally somebody has to step and say, okay, this is getting out of control. Let's get it reined in as to what is acceptable for an exempt sign or not. So within these temporary signs, we've decided to amend a little bit of this language to allow property owners this luxury without needing to get permitted, but also keep it within a reasonable extent. So signs less than 6 square feet in size associated with an event or sale less than 30 days shall be permitted through a sign permit application with no fee charged. So for example, one of our grocers hosted, I think it was Green River Melons. They had a big sign that said Green River Melons Sale. It's a temporary, very specific sale sign that we want to allow those property owners and commercial entities to put up a banner like that without having to mess with the city necessarily with permitting, because it is such a short time. What we don't want to see is large banners that say open or sale that are up all year round. Really, that's redundant and doesn't meet the intentions of this code or the idea of what signage on a building, given our current sign code, is, unless of course you guys feel that we do want to allow that and move forward in that direction. We can certainly make those changes as well. And then of course that note, if there's anything else that you believe should be included in that temporary sign section. Now this part 3, we didn't have any explicit content to add at this time until just yesterday. Communicating with city administration about political signs. Currently, there is a component for political signs in our code. They are permitted, as some of us might know. It's a fairly easy, low impact process, but the fee that's associated is not adequate to the amount of staff time it requires to actually process a permit. So while we don't want to charge our political sign campaign signs candidates a large fee for this, because it's something that should be kind of by right, we wouldn't be able to continue doing that without losing money, so to speak, on the processing of those. So political signs, through this, we put into that exempt category where they would not need a permit. They would still have to follow sign code as far as where they could be placed, not in the right of way, under a certain size, those certain elements for code compliance, but they would not need an official permit that would be paid a fee and processed. So we would incorporate that with definitions, and then definitions include blade signs of what those are and what the limitations on those would be. That's the end of the presentation. I'll close the share window, but if we do need to pop back in to view some of that, just let me know.
Yeah, Corey, I have some questions. Is there specific language talking about the type of like digital colors that can be displayed on these signs?
There isn't language like that now, as we had just shown. That is taken right from the code of what we do have. So that being said, there's maybe two answers to this. One is that we, at this time, are not permitting any. So regardless of color, the type of display, like a TV or projection, would not be permitted at all, regardless. However, as you might have seen within the community, there are on the high school and the middle school new LED signs that are posted there. Being on SITLA land governed by the school district, they fall under different zoning parameters. So we are working with them to mitigate some of the impacts of the community as far as how bright those signs are at certain times of day, and then when they may even shut off, rather than for them hitting them with language of prohibited or not. They kind of run under their own rules, so to speak. So I don't know if that specifically answers that color question or where you might want to take that.
Well, I'm also thinking about, not only signage, I guess, it's like decorative things, like the Radcliffe Hotel, I guess, is a good example. There's really bright green, like LED, like strip line colors coming in. I personally hate that. Like, in our town sky, you're walking at night and you see these bright green, very unnecessary lines in the sky, and I like to think that we're not Vegas, and I don't want to head that way. So is there anything we can do about that?
I believe there is, to a certain extent. So I haven't seen those lights. I feel like I should have seen them on plan set, so I'm not sure where they are in the approval of the plans or not. The Radcliffe was approved a number of years ago, but through the building permit process, I've been engaged with them. neon lights and colored lights are not are not prohibited under our dark sky code. In fact, neon lights and colored lights throw less light pollution and displacement trespass than do white light standard illumination type lighting. So that was a study through Flagstaff, who's kind of a leading community in dark sky. So colors are actually on the end of the spectrum better. However, like you're saying, the way in which they're being displayed still has to comply as far as shielded or non-trespass with the illumination fixture itself. So if it's a bar light, the bar would have to be concealed, but the glow would not necessarily have to be concealed. So I don't know if within our code right now, I don't think we would solve the concern that I think you're posing, but that concern is a valid concern that we can certainly make note of and how to move forward with that.
I guess where I would like to move forward with that is like future planning. I don't know another word for it, but like aesthetic of Moab and like what we display in our town and like what we allow. Because like if we just like start allowing like random little things like that all over the town, like I feel like that could eventually ruin, the aesthetic. And not that we necessarily have one, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. We find our aesthetic and our lack thereof, our eclectic.
Yeah. Our aesthetic is random aesthetics.
Soon to be stained glass.
Yes, stained glass if Ruben had run for mayor and were elected.
So that I'll make note of that, and maybe even bring. Well, I'll make note of that.
Does some of that fall into, the dark skies legislation that was passed?
Totally. Yeah. So we're kind of out of the sign code a little bit with this comment and more into the dark skies.
Yeah.
But that's something that our dark skies code was brought over mostly intact from an outside source. So moving forward, saying we've had this implemented for a matter of time now, and we're seeing these holes where certain things aren't being addressed, it really wouldn't be unsurmountable to try to add amendments, just like we're doing with sign code here, saying it's mostly intact, but let's update this and get this coordinated. We do have a long list of things like that we'd like to approach. But as we know, noticing and getting city council buy-in for any type of code amendment, text or zoning is a challenge to get the buy-in with everybody. But that's something we'll add to our list for sure to analyze and see what our solution might be.
Yeah, I think it certainly seems like the light trespass issue should already be covered by our dark sky code, shielded, unshielded. I know there's still lots of existing lighting that is not yet into compliance. We're still within that grace period, but there's definitely some bad examples around town of just sign lighting. That's the upward facing side lighting that just isn't allowed under dark sky ordinance. But
so out of curiosity, sorry with this before we move away from Britton's comment too much, is it all colored lighting that we may want to evaluate spectrum lighting outside of white or yellow?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely like science behind the like what kind of lights and how they disperse. I think we definitely should not allow like bright white, blue, and green as those, especially in Moab. I would rather see warm lighting. Yellow, I would rather see yellow and orange in our night sky, even though they do technically travel further. I don't know. I would like to hear other people's comments on that.
If I'm not mistaken, there is already a clause in the code for light temperature, right?
It is. That's generally pertaining to what might be considered white spectrum light. And I don't want to get too far away from sign code here, but we're talking code, so might as well open it up a little bit. Yeah, temperature lighting is what you might consider white light or full spectrum code, but in that temperature decrease, it gets into a more amber or yellowish hue, and that's your Kelvin, ranging from 6,000 Kelvin to 20,000, 2,000. Sorry, 6,000 to 2,000. But yeah, the lights, LED lights like blue, green, yellow, are a different light type entirely.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. I've seen a lot of confusion among local business owners about what isn't allowed. And I think just anytime we make it more user friendly, that's always really good. Even if ultimately the answer is no, you still can't have this. I think the more that the public can find that answer themselves without, and then it's easier for code enforcement as well.
Right.
If the time comes, which is great. You know me, I love cleaning up the code. It's my favorite thing to do.
I love that too. Yeah. So are we going to be voting on whether or not we're moving signage code completely to one spot?
Not tonight. This is discussion to.
Yeah, eventually. I'm on that team now.
What was that?
I'm on the team of moving everything to do with signs into one specific spot.
Yeah.
It's one of the pretty obvious things that we've been kind of kicking around
What
for
if
a
I
while.
said I wasn't?
I think where applicable, we should try and have continuity with the county when we can.
Yeah.
Because there's these weird pockets of county within the city. And then like you just brought up the point of the high school and the middle school, like I've definitely noticed the sign at the high school is very bright when you're driving down 400 East, and so for those residents living right across the street there,
like you.
Well, I'm not directly across the street, so it doesn't shine in my window, but so they have some continuity in how stuff like that might be enforced too.
Yeah. I think, if there's anything, Corey, and I'm sure this is already y'all's plan, but anything we can borrow for consistency's sake from the county, that's good. That'd be really great for that same reason, because it is, we have all sorts of random arbitrary boundaries between the city and the county. And I think it's extra confusing for residents when someone who's 2 feet away can do one thing and they can't, or vice versa.
Right. Yeah, what's difficult is with it to a certain extent. I think we want to try to make those consistencies, but at the end of the day, a municipality and a county they are separate community types, and where those two communities come together, which in Moab is a really unique thing. Often they don't abut in such a way that the county continues to operate like a municipality far beyond the municipality limit. So I want it to go both ways is what I think I'm trying to say is we'll do our best to incorporate elements of code that make sense that they're producing, and we would love to work with them as we're developing some of our code as well to have that branch off into the county as well. Topic wise, something within this packet that, just going through really quick on the checklist. Did anybody have any concerns with the new language components that we're adding? The LED was one of them. And then of course the two other ones were the blade signs, which would be a big topic, and then the temporary sale signs. If there's any other types of concerns you've seen in the community or signs that you think stand out as they shouldn't be permitted there, and maybe they are now, or signs that are prohibited that maybe ought not to be prohibited.
I think it makes sense. I like that you're making the distinction between we've got Green River Melons today, temporary sign, and something that's just like a sign that a business owner would put out every day when they open as a matter of course. Like those are two very different things to me. And they obviously have, there's a temporary and a long-term impact both visually and spatially. And so that seems to make sense that you'd need a permit for one and not for the other, depending on the size and the duration.
Right.
What is considered temporary? Is it 30 days, 60 days?
Temporary for a majority of the other temporary signs is undefined. It's, for example, if a business, a commercial business is starting up and they're a new building, for example, and they don't have their official signage developed by a sign company just yet, but they have their CO, they have their business license, they want to start, they could put up a temporary banner that would be permitted in the scenario that, well, maybe they never get that sign and it stays up forever. We have it at least in our system as a temporary permitted sign. So I guess the answer is there isn't a cap on that. What we use is what we think of as temporary is cloth, canvas, banner type materials, or A-frame sandwich board signs are temporary, as in not structurally attached, rather than, so temporary as in structure rather than in time limit. However, in this instance, we do want to add that day count to make it a little bit more enforceable that, man, those Green River melons have been up for 2 years. They must have really good stock on them. That's what we're trying to curb here. But yeah, we really don't want to be too onerous to the extent possible, but be able to, when something is getting out of hand or invasive of what we're here for, which is health, safety, and welfare of the community, we're able to step in saying we do have code that supports us addressing this.
Well, and I think it also helps for folks to design and construct and install signs that actually fit within the requirements that all the rest of their neighbors have to meet. Because I know sometimes, like the blade signs, for example, they're a stand-in for what would be a permanent designed sign otherwise, had they not
Right.
had a sign. So
Right. And that takes us really nicely into blade signs and us prohibiting them at this point with this code. Does anybody seem to have alternative feelings to that, or where we'd like to go?
I know there's a
Prohibiting
number
all
of
blade signs?
small local businesses that really do pretty heavily employ them, like food trucks, for example. There's a few mobile food trucks where it's nice because they can move the truck and then they can move the sign. I don't want to overly burden those business owners. I know the burden would really be they just wouldn't have those signs anymore. You know, it's not like they're getting fined or anything like that. But if they did want that extra sort of notice and attention, they'd have to do something else.
Right. And that's what the code that the language we currently have drafted, there's that little bit of extension that says it's prohibited unless permitted through or attached to a permitted display apparatus, which is code taken pretty much right from the food truck code, you might say. So that's who we had in mind for, where should we allow blade signs? Kind of with those small, specifically mobile businesses, or where display apparatuses, and there's definitions for that, exist. If you're a big established commercial business, you have the square footage and wall area to really advertise, whereas some of these other smaller, sometimes mobile businesses don't. That's why it was, let's give them a little leg up with what is currently permitted, saying we just need to attach it, because that's what our code currently says. But then these other places, they can do blade signs, but they would have to be approved and permitted in association with a permitted display apparatus with which most commercial properties don't have the option for.
Okay.
So we're back ending by kind of saying they're okay here and they're not here because of that reason, trying to give more display for those businesses.
So in that definition, does that include then like A-frame type signage? Like
Right now, we don't have sandwich border A-frames, I don't believe specifically defined, which is another part of some of our issues, is that we've had to make interpretive policies based on what the code does say as far as our exempt signs, which are service signs. So if you had a sandwich board that had open written on it, that might be a qualifying temporary sign which is supposed to be moved in and out every day, versus a sandwich board that's out there that has a bunch of other information on it and it never moves. That would be technically what would need to be permitted as a permanent sign. So what is difficult in identifying and defining every single sign is somebody's going to come up with something new tomorrow that we wouldn't be able to define. So our sign code would be pages and pages long, and we still wouldn't be able to attach everything. So it is good that we're able to get the intention behind this is an exempt sign, this is not an exempt sign, and we're able to help that, and then putting caps on the square footage for that. So for example, most exempt service signs or directional signs need to be under 2 square feet. That's a sufficient amount of space to identify entrance or exit or parking in back or even open, versus something that is 20 square feet is a little over the top just to say the word open.
Yeah, I guess I'm more wondering how it would affect, like, say, a food truck, for example, if they have a sandwich board type sign that's out, that's weighted down, so it's not going to blow away, but that had menus or something that they took in and out. Is that going to still be permitted?
There would be ways in which we could permit that. Technically, with food trucks specifically, any display apparatuses need to be attached. And that's for the safety of typically where those food trucks are, is they don't have often a lot of room. So to prevent things from blowing away, umbrellas, things like that. So there are ways around that we could say, okay, well, you chain your sandwich board to the side of your truck. It's attached, and then you can take it with you, of course, when you leave or close shop, and they'd be able to do something like that.
Yeah, I think we should definitely make it as easy as possible for small businesses to do what they need to do and not put so many bridges and stuff. And also blade signs, aren't they also considered just like they can be permanent signs that, like, when you're walking down the sidewalk, that's the sign you see, and that's like the identification of the store. Is that not a blade sign?
I might be confused.
What is a blade sign? Because I was thinking the feather looking ones that come out and then they fan down.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, lightweight flag
Yeah.
signs that typically will turn in the wind. They're weighted with a pivot at the bottom.
Yeah.
Can we call those feather signs?
We could certainly.
No, mainly because I was at the beginning, I looked up blade sign and I'm like, I can't picture a single one of these in town that would, like, why do food trucks have these?
Yeah, that's where I was at.
And so I went ahead and looked up feather sign, and that's exactly what I assumed we were talking about.
That's a great commentary, because they're relatively new in code as far as prohibiting or permitting. So we've gone with just what the common term we've heard them called, which was blade.
Okay.
But feather signs, if it's more common and appears to be that's how people are going to identify it, we should certainly make that change to make it more understandable.
We could include both easily, just so there's not a confusion.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, when you look up blade signs, they come up with signs that are permanent signs that are on Main Street. And so if you do put language in there that's like prohibiting blade signs, there would be quite a few signs on Main Street that would not be permitted.
Right.
Oh,
yeah,
you have the
I'm seeing them
definition
called blade feather banners, blade feather flags. So everyone's right, basically.
Okay.
So yes.
Right. And that might be a good collection of I don't know if it'd be nouns or adjectives, but we have blade, feather, flag, signs.
Yeah. Because
Which
what those folks are referring to is when you Google blade signs, most of the images that come up are just like the post coming out of the building with the hanging sign on it,
right,
which we of course have all over and are great and fit with
Right.
the character of our town.
right. To clarify, yeah, for anybody watching, those were not what we're talking about. We're talking about the flag feather signs.
Yep. Cool. No, that's good. That makes sense to me, I think. So for a food truck, for example, some of the common examples I've seen of these, other than ones out in the county, so we'll see what the county does, are examples that are on a food truck where maybe it's to make it so that they are attached. There's like a banner flag coming out from the food truck to the sign and then back in, like a little pennant flag. I've seen that a couple of times before.
That might be a little weak on our end. I think we've seen this before, and would tolerate, I think, something like this in line with what I think our hope is on the four corners of that truck. You could do a feather flag coming out from each, where the main spine of that feather is attached to the truck.
Yeah. But
Something like that would make sense.
You still couldn't have like your truck back here, your feather flag out in the right of way. Or
That's what
the right of way.
That's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Right. Those are where we're finding issues created.
Cool. All right, thanks for updating us on that and introducing that. I look forward to seeing the code that y'all come up with.
Okay. I think
I guess while we're on the topic still of code, because we're moving into planning and zoning, and I was hopping on and looking at the MMC, there are a couple of reserved spots. What are those for?
right. When new code is generated, because there's already an established order without having to go in and bump everything by one digit,
Yeah.
if they've interspersed. So this was one where the sign code may have fit in earlier. That's something we could have coordinated with the recorder's office within the MMC. However, signs are easy as far as to identify at the end of the code, where one of those reserve spots might be better served by a new zone we create. So if there's a reserve section next to zoning, it would be, C3, C4, C5, and then C6 in that reserve section, for instance, or some of the supplementary code areas. So sign code was one we had figured when we're generating this, it would be okay to put at the bottom rather than eat up one of those reserve sections. Great question.
Well, actually, what I was looking at was on the general page. So not actually going into 17, going into zoning, you have like a missing 14 or a missing 7
I see.
and 11.
Right. I believe.
So why pack them into zoning and planning and zoning rather than just keeping them out of it, such as
So sign codes being
sidewalks
its own title. Within the general municipal code, as you're seeing in that title page, where there's animals, health and safety, what each of those might operate in conjunction with is a department within the city. So
Sure.
like special events is within the administration office, public peace, morals and welfare is the police department, sidewalk streets is engineering, and then of course building construction is building department, and then zoning is planning.
Okay, I can follow that. And signs are dealt with by the planning and zoning, and so
Exactly.
in conjunction, we'll keep them there. That makes sense.
That'd be under our umbrella. That's right.
Yeah,
Perfect.
almost everything we are ever going to do or considered is in Title 17 of the code. If you're ever looking for stuff, it's a good place to start. All right, future agenda items.
We will likely have another minor subdivision coming up. And then we do have a number of site plans that will be coming to the Planning Commission for final approval that are in DRT review right now. We're waiting on the final approval for that to get them reviewed. So I don't know if that'll be in this next meeting. I think the minor subdivision likely could be. but yeah, I anticipate the planning commission is going to have a lot of time spent with the presentation that Nora just gave on Tuesday for the resolution approving the not TZO, but not pending ordinance necessarily either, but the resolution declaring that we are now addressing the R3 and R4 multi-household requirements. It's a pretty big deal, very exciting. And so certainly I think next meeting, we're going to be dealing with that quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd really encourage anyone who wasn't at that meeting or watching that meeting already to tune in to hear Nora's presentation about it. This was a conversation, a small conversation we had with some city staff, myself a little while ago, realizing that what we're seeing happening in some of our higher density zones that aren't actually built out to their allowed high density is that we are getting new developments that don't meet some of the community's needs. So we need to address what is and isn't allowed or required in the code to hopefully incentivize or even set aside requirements for some deed restricted local occupant housing within those developments as they're built out. So say a single family home on a large lot in the R3 is bought by a developer or a local developer even, and they level the existing property and plan to actually build it out to the allowable density, which in the R3 is quite high. A percentage of that new build of those new units would need to be reserved for local occupancy instead of just listed at market rate and sold, a lot of them as second homes to folks not in the community. So it's something other towns have done. It's something other places are addressing with these sort of in the base code requirements. So this wouldn't be like if someone wanted something special, this would just be period. If you plan to have more than 2 units in one of these denser areas, this is a requirement for at least a portion of them. So, but it'll be a lot, and it'll be a lot for us to work on, but I think it's important. And I think it's a good step for us to actually get ahead of some things. I know we're always sort of chasing behind, and this might actually be a time where we can really make some positive changes that look toward the future. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah. And huge thanks to the staff, as always, for taking that on top of the list of the other many day-to-day and long-term things that you're dealing with. So, all right. That said, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, John, for calling in, especially. Really appreciate it. I will adjourn our meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 7:00 p.m.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.